По поводу того, сложился или не сложился многополярный мир. В целом,
Regarding whether a multipolar world has formed or not. In general, its outlines have certainly formed, but I would not talk about any dominance in this multipolar world. After all, when we talk about multipolarity, it doesn't mean that some new hegemons should appear. No one sets the questions that way, neither within the framework of the SCO nor within the framework of BRICS. All participants in international communication should have equal rights, and from the point of view of international law, they should all be in an equal position. Yes, of course, there are economic giants like India, China, and by the way, our own country is among the top 4 largest countries in the world by purchasing power parity. This is all in the reality of today. These aren't our calculations. These are calculations of international organizations. But this does not mean that someone should dominate in political or any other sphere, including the sphere of security. Therefore, we do not assume that some new dominant state should appear. Everyone should be equal. I think it's an unsuccessful attempt to remove the responsibility from themselves. Well, not from him personally, but from their side and from the collective West in general, to remove responsibility for the tragedy happening now in Ukraine. What do I mean? I will remind you. I have said it repeatedly. In 2014, ministers from 3 European countries arrived in Kiev and signed a document that, in essence, was an agreement between the acting government, between President Yanukovych at the time, and the opposition. And according to this agreement, all political questions should have been resolved within the constitutional field, peacefully, legally. But literally a day later, or the next day, there was a bloody and brutal coup. None of these guarantors lifted a finger to return the situation to the legal field. This is where the conflict began because immediately afterward events started happening in Crimea, and immediately after that, the Kiev regime initiated military actions using armored vehicles and aviation against the civilian population of those regions of Ukraine that did not agree with this coup. They then thwarted all our attempts to resolve this issue by peaceful means and essentially publicly refused to fulfill the Minsk agreements. So, who is to blame for the tragedy happening? Those who brought about this situation by completely ignoring the interest of Russia in the sphere of its security. If someone thinks they can treat our country's people in a disrespectful manner, they should know that we will never tolerate such things where Russia passively watches events happening around it without any response. We have spoken about this many times. I think there's nothing new to say here. We said that some want to take, and some do not. The smarter ones do not want to. Yes, that's true. Here, without any irony or aiming at those who are less wise. Why? Because the smarter ones are the people who deal with finance and the economy. They understand that this will destroy all principles of international economic and financial activities and will undoubtedly cause huge harm to the entire world economy and international finance. Because even now, in many countries around the world, alliances are being formed that try to implement their own economic development plans within specific regions. And in this case, such economic separatism will only intensify, and the overall financial economic world order will be destroyed. Relations with China are developing not only in the field of economy and energy, but also in the field of culture. One of the landmark events of this year is the release of a joint film, Red Silk. And you talked about this with Xi Jinping during his visit to Moscow in May, mentioning it during an interview with the Xinhua agency. So, tell us, will there be more such projects? And perhaps you got to watch Red Silk as well. Share your emotions if you did. Actually, it's the idea of Chairman Xi Jinping. We were at one of the events together, and I noticed that it's very difficult for our producers to break into the Chinese market. But he just smiled and said, let's produce joint films, and then the market is open. Indeed, that's the case. And one of the first swallows is Red Silk. I haven't seen this film, but I know there will be a presentation here literally tomorrow or the day after. On the whole, according to the stories, it is popular today, and people watched it with pleasure. And of course, we have plans laid out. If you are interested, you can ask the Minister of Culture Lyubimova. She will give you more precise plans that exist in this regard. But as far as I know, work on other joint film projects is already underway. This is indeed a very good way to work on the huge, very powerful, and attractive Chinese market. To be honest, I don't even understand what you're talking about. I'm busy with my current work and try to focus less on various rumors and speculations, as you mentioned. This is a project that has indeed been underway for a long time, and we've been discussing it with our partners for ages. There were several routes, each with its pros and cons. Negotiations have been going on for many years. But as everyone knows, the global economy, despite being in recession in many countries, like the leading economies of the Eurozone, continues to develop, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. The demand for energy resources is growing, including in the Chinese economy, which continues to be one of the driving forces of the global economy. Over 5% growth. This growth is built on a base. Some say their GDP growth rates have decreased. Yes, they have decreased, but the base has grown over time. And over 5% growth that we observe today is quite different from the 5% over 10 to 15 years ago. And what does that lead to? It leads to an increase in the demand for energy resources. Finally, the negotiating parties reached a consensus. There's no charity from either side. These are mutually beneficial agreements based on market rules of this very region. And by the way, the price for this product is not determined by today's prices but through a certain formula, which is purely objective and market-based. Therefore, there is a demand from the growing Chinese economy, and we have the capability to supply these resources. Ultimately, this is not tied to our meeting. It's just the result of years of work by companies on both sides. Of course, this will create competitive advantages for our Chinese friends because, I repeat, they will receive the product at balanced market prices, not inflated ones, as we see now in the Eurozone. And most importantly, it's a stable supply, a reliable supply. Everyone is satisfied with this result, and honestly, so am I. After all, Gazprom is one of our leading companies, and they are entering and expanding into new markets. Overall, we will have 50 billion coming through Mongolia. Currently, it's 38, and then a couple more routes will also be increased. In total, it will exceed 100 billion cubic meters of gas.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.